the Tyndale legacy. The black lettering here is a little bit difficult to read. But that's essentially the type of lettering that it would have been printed in. And this are the first couple of pages for the book of Acts from the New Testament that was published in 1526. So that's what we're looking at. I have a copy of this. It's a facsimile. I can barely read it. Not so much that it's the old lettering, but it's my old eyes. It becomes a little bit difficult to see. But there's a lot of room here in this room at the moment. But there is a bit of an elephant in the room. Nice modern English idiom. Tyndale and English. I can well imagine when I look out here, and not everybody is a native English speaker, he might be saying, what difference does it make to me? Or perhaps you might saying, it's not my native language. And I'm sure that that's true for a number of you. It's not your native language. It's not my ministry language. I don't expect to be using English when I go back home and am working in ministry. And you might be saying, well, what about other languages? Why focus so much on the English language? Because after all, German, we've already spoken about that, and French, and Dutch, and more than 6,000 languages spoken in the world today. And you might be saying, should I even care? And to be honest about it, these are really valid objections. And so I want to kind of consider for a moment in this presentation, why would we be interested at all if we are not English speakers in our normal ministry? Why would we be interested in how somebody like Tyndale affected the English language? I'm a native English speaker, and so it's an interesting subject to me, but I don't want to be kind of an Anglophile language chauvinist in that sense. David Daniel, who is probably one of the more prominent biographers of William Tyndale, said, of course, in Germany and France and in the Netherlands, above all, there were important printed vernacular Bible translations, as there were in Scandinavia and even Italy. Yet the printed English Bibles of the 16th century should hold a special place in the history, not only of England, but of the whole world. And you might be wondering, well, why? Is this just because this scholar is really focused a lot on Tyndale? So a special place in history, not only of England, but of the whole world. And one of the things I want to try to do during this talk is I want to try to open your thinking to the possibility that this is really, really important, not just for native English-speaking people, but for the entire world. The point is not so much that a specific language is in view, but how translations into the... Excuse me. All times for that to happen. Produce significant and lasting changes in society. That's what really happened. That there was some specific things that happened in society at that particular time. And other language groups had the same sort of thing happen. I can completely understand, for example, the effect that Luther's translation into German had a profound effect on the German language. Up until that time, German was spoken in various dialects, and through Luther's translation of the Bible, it brought a more or less standard German into being. And there were other languages similar to that where the Bible had an effect. And I don't want to minimize that and say that that's not important. It most certainly was. And of course, we've already spoken a bit about Erasmus and Luther. And in a certain sense, Erasmus really was important for Tyndale, as well as Luther. That if there had not been Erasmus and Luther before Tyndale, it's maybe questionable what direction would Tyndale have actually gone. We do know that Tyndale read Erasmus. There's some really pretty good indications of it. What I found fascinating, I found this little snippet from Erasmus. We've already spoken about the plowboy and how Tyndale, that's a really common quotation from Tyndale about the plowboy being able to read the Bible and understand it better than the Pope. But Erasmus had this to say. He said, Christ wishes his mysteries published as openly as possible. I would that even the lowliest women read the Gospels and the Pauline epistles. And I would that they were translated into all languages so that they could be read and understood not only by Scots and Irish, but also by Turks and Saracens. Would that, as a result, the farmer sing some portion of them at the plow. When I read this, I thought to myself, I can see where Tyndale probably got the plowboy idea. He probably had read this from Erasmus. And not only at the plow, the weaver hummed some parts of them to the movement of his shuttle. The traveler lightened the weariness of the journey with stories of this kind. Let all the conversations of every Christian be drawn from this source. You can kind of see in the heart of Erasmus that he had this desire as well. He didn't go quite in the same direction that Tyndale did, but there was this movement. There was this desire on the part of a number of people that the common people would actually have the Bible in their own language. I'm going to speak a little bit about the singing later on when in this talk. So this is kind of Erasmus, and then we've already mentioned about Cambridge and how Cambridge was uniquely situated because you could go up the river to Cambridge, and so things were being smuggled in there. And I like just use your imagination here. Some students were deeply concerned with the state of affairs in the church and the nation. They were devout students, but they defied the official ban, frequenting pubs to secretly read smuggled books of Luther's subversive literature. This made Cambridge England's gateway to the Reformation ideas. Use your imagination a little bit. Can you imagine Cambridge students surreptitiously going to the pub and studying Luther? I find it rather ironic, but in all seriousness, it was a serious business that these students must have been doing. That to be reading something like Luther would have caused some really difficult situations. Dr. Sandifer mentioned about John Wycliffe being considered to be the morning star of the Reformation, and the imagery was already there in Dr. Sandifer's talk. perhaps William Tyndale may be seen as one of the brightest stars of a Reformation constellation. And I like the sound of that, the Reformation constellation. And that's one of the things I want you to take away from this lecture, is that it was something of a constellation. That Tyndale was a bright star, but just like the constellations, you see a constellation, and sometimes some of the stars are a little more brighter than the others. Here's a first page, or a page, from Siderius Nuncius, which was written and published by Galileo in 1610, the year before the King James Bible was published. And Galileo was recording his observations of the heavens through a telescope. This is, again, one of the things that was happening in the world at that time. The desire to know more, the desire to see more. And so I just like the idea that at the same time this sort of thing was happening. And we'll consider a little bit about this Reformation constellation. And that scholar, Daniel, who talked about the importance of the English translations, said that it's a bit of a puzzle to a certain extent. What exactly was it that was happening in the English Reformation that was maybe not happening in quite the same way elsewhere? And one of the things that he noted is that from the time of the beginning of the Reformation until the publication of the King James Version in 1611, there were 10 major translations and publications of the English Bible. And those were 10 major ones, and there were several minor ones as well, portions that were produced. There were literally hundreds and thousands of portions of Scripture that had been translated into English that were taking place in that relatively short period of time. So that a country of roughly, at that time, about 6 million, I think, in England, there were probably a couple hundred, or there were several hundred thousands of Bibles or portions of Bibles that were available. And so you have in 1526 the first edition of the Tyndale New Testament. Then in 1534 he revised it. It was a significant revision. Then in 1535 the Coverdale Bible came out. And I'll speak a little bit more about Coverdale. In fact, I'm going to use him as a bit of an example in what I mean about the stars in the constellation of the Reformation translation. Then, of course, Matthew's so-called Bible in 1537, which was just simply a compilation of Tyndale's translations with additions where Tyndale had not gotten to the Old Testament. Then there was something called the Taverner. A man named Taverner published his translation in 1539. And then the Great Bible in 1539 as well, followed by the Geneva Bible in 1560, and I'll have a little bit more to say about the Geneva Bible because I think this is, again, a very significant part of this constellation. Then the Bishop's Bible in 1568. The Reims Bible in 1610, and I've put that in red and italics because this is a Catholic response to all of this translation work that was going on. In other words, a Bible was written or produced, translated from a Catholic perspective, where they wanted to defend some of those areas in the translations that the Protestant translations were already addressing, and yet it was one of the Bibles that had an effect in the Reformation as well, even as a response to it. And then, of course, the King James version that came out in 1611. And you might wonder then about Tyndale and his language, Tyndale and the English that he used in his translation. And I know that it's a bit of a cliche to speak about DNA these years. They didn't know anything about DNA at that time. But now it's a bit of a cliche that organizations have a certain DNA, or that a certain movement has a certain DNA. It has certain features about it that get kind of handed down. And to a certain extent, we see that here in the translation, because when the King James was going to be published, the committee of scholars, and there were quite a number of them. I think it was over 50 scholars were commissioned to produce the King James. They were supposed to look at the Bishop's Bible as well as several others, including the Great Bible, Matthew's, the Coverdale, the Tyndale New Testament revision in 1534, and going back to 1526. And then the Geneva Bible as well looked back to Tyndale's 1534 translation of the New Testament. And of course, there's a connection then between the Geneva Bible and the King James Bible. And what this means overall is that roughly 84% of the King James New Testament goes back to Tyndale's. There's Tyndale language that flows through all of these translations. The Reims Bible and the Taverner Bible, a bit of an exception, but in other words, when Tyndale translated, it had an effect on several others. And there were a consequence for all of this revision. And this is what makes it so interesting, so particularly interesting, what was going on in England, is that you had this DNA of Tyndale's desire for accuracy, clarity, and beauty. That's what he wanted in his translations. And then there was variation and refinement. So from 1530 or 1526 until 1611, there was this constant turning over, back and forth, variation and refinement. And so this is going on in the English translations that was perhaps much less occurring in other languages that were being translated. And so this produced a real avalanche, you might say, of translation work. Or maybe a better analogy, I kind of think of it being like an explosion in a certain sense. That all of a sudden, translation was just going off all over the place. In that 80 to 100 years, how much was actually going on. If any of you have ever lived in a desert, and then you have rain come into the desert at a certain point, and the very next thing you see is that there's green shoots of things coming up and flowers. I remember seeing that in the American Southwest when an area of the desert got burned and then rain came and it just sprouted green shoots and flowers. And that's what this looks like to me in terms of God's Word. It looks to me like when this got started, that there was this flowering of translation work that went out. Specifically about the type of language, though, Tyndale used some words in particular that had theological and ecclesiological significance. One of them was the word for church, ecclesia, which was in the Latin Bible, the Vulgate, translated in a way that would imply the church, meaning an institution primarily. But Tyndale knew better, and in fact he had known from other work that had been done that a better way of translating ecclesia would be congregation or assembly. And there's a real big difference between a church as an institution and a congregation or an assembly. And this had significant implications for what was going on at the time. Another word is agape, which was translated in a way that we would say maybe charity today in the Latin, but he translated it as love. Priest and elder. Once again, this was a distinction that he was making. He used the word priest, but only for Old Testament portions. Instead he translated it in the New Testament generally as being elder or bishop or overseer. And then what had already been mentioned and was part of Erasmus' work was the idea of the metanoia, being the penance or being repentant. And so this had significant effect on the translation of Tyndale. And these four words, probably in particular, caused a considerable amount of difficulty. Tyndale also used a lot of English idioms, or at least English idioms became a part of the language through what Tyndale had written in the Bible. And as I had mentioned earlier, as far as his literary style, he was looking for clarity. He wanted people to really be able to understand it. He wanted them to be accurate. He wanted it to really reflect what the text was saying. And he also had a desire for that which was beautiful. The language needed to have some aesthetic quality to it. And so he was pushing for clarity, accuracy, and beauty. I think you can begin to see the tensions here, and how you can be so accurate that you lose the clarity, or you can be so accurate, but then it loses something of the beauty of the language. And so there's, when you're translating from one language into the next, if you're looking to do those three things at the same time, there's necessarily going to have to be decisions that you make in your translation. And I think for all of the students here, you're going to be challenged here at Tyndale in this particular area. As you study the original languages, you're going to want your translations to be accurate. You want them to go according to what it really is saying in the Greek, the Hebrew, or the Aramaic. But at the same time, if you want people in your churches, in the pews, to understand it, you're going to be wanting to look for that clarity as well. And I'll say a little bit more about the beauty of the languages as well. The beauty of the language is important also. It should be a reflection of the original text, but it also ought to resonate with the people that are the recipients of the translations. I remember a number of years ago, I spent a few days with one of the old Wycliffe translators, a man who had gone to Mexico in the 1930s under the Wycliffe translators. And he had translated an entire New Testament into one of the Mexican Indian tribal languages. And then he moved on to a second language among the same tribal group, more or less. And then he went to a third one. And by the time he got to the third New Testament translation, can you imagine that? He realized that his first one was not very good. He realized that there was something missing in the beauty of the language, that there were better ways of saying it than what he had selected. Ironically, what happened was he went back to that first tribal group and he says, I'm going to retranslate this. I'm going to rework it. And they said, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do it? He says, well, that's God's word. And he had a hard time convincing the people there that he really needed to revise that first translation and make it clearer, more accurate, and perhaps more beautiful. I don't know if he ever completed that revision of that first translation, but he certainly had something of the heart of Wycliffe. But he also had something of the heart of William Tyndale, I think, as well. Yes, and at the bottom, according to David Daniel, at the bottom, Tyndale's offense has been to offer people Paul in English and translate 4 key New Testament words, presbyteros, ecclesia, agape, and metanoia, in their correct Greek meanings. Instead of priest, church, charity, and to do penance. You can see how his choice of being accurate, in this case, got him into some trouble. But it wasn't just with the church as such. Because then it had implications as well, politically and socially, in terms of the various kings, including the king in England. So they were deriving their earthly authority, people, from the congregation and not from the hierarchy with the ultimate seat in Rome. And then that democratic ethos, that democratic idea of Tyndale's New Testament was a threat not merely to the Roman Catholic Church, but also to the monarchy. Consequently, England's kings began to take an active interest in overseeing Bible translations. I think we've already seen this, where Henry VIII got involved, and I'll try to to cover an interesting thing there with Coverdale. So you had this situation with the Pope on one side, and you had the king on the other, and you then would have Tyndale, kind of the little guy in the middle, and he's looking to God's word as being the authority, and the authority that's going to be over the king and over the papacy as well, or over the church in that sense. So there's this real tension that was going on involved in the choice, particularly of those 4 words, but I think the entire translation was a challenge to them. And in doing his translation, of course, he coined a number of words and expressions, but not just him. Because of Tyndale, we have things like peacemaker and Passover, long-suffering, scapegoat, the Lord's anointed, flowing with milk and honey. You hear these expressions, and that when you hear those expressions, even from a source that is not directly from, like, say, the King James Version, you know that its origins in English come back to Tyndale. Filthy lucre. Maybe you've heard somebody talk about, oh, filthy lucre, or that person is salt of the earth. So these types of words and expressions and coined words can be looked back to Tyndale. From Coverdale, we get some others, like tender mercies, respect of persons, and that fascinating little word, not little, it's a fairly long word, loving kindness, where Coverdale was trying to bring into his people's understanding of just what is the covenant love of God, the chesed. And so he coined the word loving kindness. Can you think of some of the songs that you sing in church today that might use expressions like loving kindness? From Coverdale, we get pride of life. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord and the valley of the shadow of death. What a beautiful expression that is. How descriptive that is, and how much it is a part of English today. It goes back to Coverdale. Geneva Bible, vanity of vanities. And get this one, except a man be born again. An expression a way of translating what was in the Gospel of John, how it came into the English language. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Or the last one there, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. These are expressions that just flow off the tongue in English and have really affected more than just simply the church. The Bishop's Bible, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, and things like sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. So some of these expressions just were coming into the English language and are part of the English language today. And sometimes people will even use some of these expressions and have no idea that it comes from the Bible. And I can, from my own personal experience, I can testify to that. The first 30 years of my life, I was not a Christian. I knew almost nothing about what was in the Bible. But after I came to Christ and began to read the Bible, sometimes things would jump out at me, and well, that's where that came from. I couldn't believe it. And some of the things that I had even heard from my mother. There's no rest for the wicked, and other expressions that she used that she probably had no idea came from the Bible as well. I'm going to take two examples of that constellation, that it's not just Tyndale. When we think of what was going on in that 80 to 100 years, we shouldn't think of just simply Tyndale. Tyndale was a brilliant scholar. Tyndale was a passionate, compassionate man. Tyndale was an outstanding translator. But there were others that were stars as well, but maybe not quite as bright as Tyndale. And I don't think we should overlook them. And Miles Coverdale, as I was doing a little bit of research for this talk, I came to really like Miles Coverdale. There's something about Miles Coverdale that has really fascinated me. I think he's a fascinating figure. C.S. Lewis said this about Miles Coverdale. He said, Coverdale shows like a rowing boat among battleships. If you can imagine. C.S. Lewis had a way with words. So you can see Miles Coverdale, in his rowboat, up against these battleships in a Reformation translation. But I'm being a little cheeky here because I'm taking this a little bit out of C.S. Lewis's context, because he goes on. He says he shows like a rowing boat among battleships. This gave him a kind of freedom, he said, to select and combine by taste. Fortunately, his taste was admirable. Wouldn't you love to have had C.S. Lewis say, to you, his taste is really admirable? So it's a little bit of a backhanded compliment to a certain extent, but yes, indeed, he had good taste. Miles Coverdale. That's Miles Coverdale. His friends called him Smiles, or Smiley for short, maybe. He needed a better picture. But in all seriousness, when you look at what contemporary people said about Miles Coverdale, or near contemporary people, you find out that he was a very pious man, that he had a godly disposition, that Miles Coverdale had passion. He had real passion for God's word, and he had compassion. Sometimes people will have passion, but they don't have that compassion. And Miles Coverdale had both of those. He was a gifted preacher, much in demand when he wasn't running away from persecution. But he was some say less than a stellar scholar. Some say that, he didn't really understand the original languages very well, if at all. Most of what he translated came out of the Latin or German. He knew German, and so he took some from Luther. But he had admirable taste. He had a talent for literary clarity and beauty. And this is important, he had an aptitude for synonyms and for the rhythmic pattern of language. And this made him very keen toward translation of Hebrew poetry. If only he had known Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, better, I can well imagine what he could have done. But because he understood synonyms, he had a real gift for this, and he had some idea of the pattern and the rhythms of of language. He was particularly good in that area. His translation of the Psalms was used for over 400 years by the Anglican Church. His Psalms got into the English church in a way that few possibly could. And so he was a remarkable translator of the Psalms. And as I say, if he had understood biblical Hebrew better than what he did, I'm not sure he understood much at all. There's no telling what he might have done. But for 400 years, your translations of the Psalms to be used is absolutely remarkable. And he had it as his goal to a certain extent. He purposely translated the Psalms to be sung, and to be sung in congregational worship. You can see where the heart of this man was. The heart of this man, his passion, his compassion was such that he wanted, just like Erasmus was saying, he wanted the people, the common people, to be singing and making melody in their hearts, just like Paul says that the church ought to be doing, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. This is where Coverdale was at. So some of the things that he translated. Oh, you've all heard this one, haven't you? By the waters of Babylon we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. I mean, the beauty of the language and the rhythm and the imagery that he employed. Why do the heathen so furiously rage together? And why do the people imagine a vain thing? Or the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. There's a rhythm. There's the whole sense. You can begin to hear the Psalms in English of his day, in a way that grabs the heart. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh also longeth for thee in a barren and dry land where no water is. Brilliant translations. Absolutely. Words and rhythm that speak to the heart, I think. So Miles Coverdale, Smiles. I want to know more about this guy. I really, really want to know more about him. And so this is one of those little gems that I have found while doing a little bit of study on this particular subject. He was exiled 3 times. He went into exile 3 times. I don't remember the years, but he spent a good 20 years total in exile from England because of his translation work. And it's a little bit sad that he's been exiled, from what I understand, a 4th time. In 1980, I believe it was, that the Anglican Church decided that the Coverdale Psalms would be replaced by something that was maybe more accurate to the original text. I don't know. I think there's maybe something of a movement by some Anglicans to bring back the Coverdale Psalms. Yes, David.
In the U.S., the Anglican Church of North America, in your prayer book, have restored the Coverdale.
Wonderful. They get a huzzah from me. Not all of his Psalms quite made it. Some of the scholars, they like to do things like name different particular Bible translations in a certain way, so that you have one of the King James editions is called the Britches Bible. because in chapter 3 of Genesis, it's translated that the Lord sewed together skins and made breeches for, breeches are a nice English. Oh, I'm clicking ahead to, this is Coverdale. So you have the Bridges Bible, yes? Okay, cut. Yeah, that's about the time. His Bible is sometimes called the Bug Bible. Thou shalt not need to be afraid of any bugs by night. What that was that the word that he was translating was actually what we would say bugbear, meaning kind of bad things that might disturb. But I know that I've spent time with trying to get to sleep at night here in the Netherlands without screens on the windows, and thou shalt not need to be afraid of any bugs by night. I'll end then on the Bugs Bible and Coverdale's legacy. Any questions?
I think maybe we'll take the questions after lunch, if that's all right, because I'm afraid we're pushing